What do you think about Cat's defense tonight on Steven Adams?
Cat's been guard, but that is strong. Like, I'm serious. He hit me with one screen today, and I thought my life was over. Like, seriously.
What is good, everybody? As you can see, we are over Zoom again. We have been locked out of the studios. I do not know why. We came in and all the lights were off. So we are now in the TV studio instead. We are in separate rooms per usual. I am in the control room and Matt is on set. This is where we record all of our Penn State Sports Night segments and stuff like that. But we are also using it, I guess, as a makeshift podcast room for the time being. But anyways, though, welcome back to Ball Don't Lie. I believe this is episode 27. Crazy. We're almost at 30. Pretty nuts. But let's start off with what we started off with last week, and that is with when's the season going to start? Because the NBA and the NBPA, that's the Players Association, they're negotiating a start date. The players are expected to vote on Thursday. That's tomorrow. We're recording this on a Wednesday. And it seems that the December 22nd start date seems inevitable, Matt.
Yeah, it was reported yesterday by Shams that they were going to have a vote, and it's pretty much inevitable at this point that it's going to start then. I think this is still too soon of a start date for the players. As we mentioned last week, Danny Green came out and said that he and a few of his teammates, including LeBron, would probably be taking games off if this were the case or if they were to start then. I understand that Adam Silver and the NBA want to get back to a somewhat normal schedule, but the players have certainly gotten the raw end of the deal on this proposal. And I got to ask you, Hunter, is this Adam Silver's first miss of 2020?
Oh, boy. Well, I'll say this because, I mean, the reason why the NBA had to restart is solely because of money.
Right.
That's the only reason. It wasn't because, I mean, obviously the bubble ended up being really safe, probably went better than even the NBA anticipated it'd go. But and if anything, they were actually safer in the bubble than they were on the outside because nobody had it, and they were getting tested literally every day. But it's different here too because it's for money reasons. Like if they start like in January, the season's going to go on later, and you're going to have the same issue again that we're currently running into with the NBA, which is a later start date because coronavirus pushed everything back. And if you start earlier, you're going to end about the same time because it's supposed to be a 72-game season. It's supposed to end in June like it normally does before the Olympics start. And then the NBA will go back on course probably the following season back to its regular routine. So I think it's if you're a team like that went far in the playoffs, it kind of sucks for you because you're not going to have all that time. And maybe you do sit some games out in the beginning. I don't know. I guess we'll see how that plays out. But it's not like, a typical season, I think that there's going to be roadblocks, and I do think December 22nd will probably be the start date for this season.
Yeah. How many games do you think they're going to play though? Because do you think they can cram 72 regular season games in and then the playoffs before the Olympics start?
That's what their plan is. I'm not exactly sure how far along they are in terms of like scheduling that out because obviously they don't have schedules yet.
Right.
But they seem pretty sold on that 72-game season. Maybe they reach a middle ground with the players and they cut it down a little bit, but I'm assuming there'll be more back-to-backs. Maybe there'll be a lot of 3 games in 4 nights kind of thing. Traveling is going to be interesting too. How many games get canceled also? Because in a sport like the NFL, it's a little easier to reschedule games because it's on a 1 game per week basis. Whereas like the NBA, they'll play like 3-4 games a week for the most part. So maybe it's easier or harder. I'm not really sure, but I'd be curious to see how that plays out too, because like every other league, the NBA is not going to have the bubble to lean on this time because you can't do that again. There's no way you're going to get the players to agree to that.
Yeah, and especially for a whole season, there's no way going to be like isolated from their families from that long. And I think you bring up an interesting point there, Hunter, about, travel and how it's easier for the NFL to reschedule. I think it is going to be tough for the NBA because even when in the MLB, when we saw them getting games canceled and they had to reschedule, they would play a whole series against a team. And the NBA doesn't do that. They play a different team pretty much every night. So that'd be really interesting to see how they would fit that in their schedule and fit that in like travel and stuff.
Yeah, I like you said, Matt. I think the NBA has got the hardest part with that because, like you said, baseball at least it's like it's a couple games, 3 games a series that you'll play against a team, so you can just reschedule those 3 games. Whereas the NBA, if a team misses 3 games, that's probably 3 different teams that also missed a game. So it's going to be a lot harder, and I'm curious to see how they juggle all that. But a lot of news about your 76ers, Matt. We broke the news about Daryl Morey becoming the president there, and we'll see what he does. He said, quote, "I feel people out there are underestimating the Sixers." Do you agree with that?
I mean, I sure hope he would have something nice to say about the Sixers, considering we just gave him a hefty sum of money. I do think this team is better than the 6th seed in the Eastern Conference that they were this season. They were decimated by injuries to key players, and they were forced to play Al Horford a lot and depend on Tobias Harris to score points a lot, and that just wasn't going to work out. I can't wait to see what Morey does though with his roster, and I have a prediction. I think he makes a trade on draft night involving Al Horford.
Oh man, who the hell wants that contract? I mean,
Hunter, we're going to give him the 21st pick. That's why.
That's true. Yeah, knowing Daryl Morey's history with draft picks, I think the only pick I can think of that he made that like I remember is Clint Capella, and that was a pretty good pick.
Yeah,
he was a late first-round guy and ended up being a good NBA player, and was pretty good for the Rockets. But other than that, I literally like can't remember a Houston Rocket pick because this guy, he's like, take him. I don't want him. He gives them out like, Oprah Winfrey gives out cars. But yeah, so I do think that pick will get moved. I'm not sure if like they are good drafters, if Morey's a good drafter or not. I don't even know if he pays attention. Like he doesn't even know what day the draft is. He's like, oh, it's today. But I do think that there's a good chance that pick gets moved. And I think if they get it for the right player, it'll probably be worth it.
I hope so. It better be.
Yeah. So I do think that pick, that 21st pick, I believe they have, is up for grabs. But let's talk about this too, because your initial reaction when Daryl Morey got hired was great. No more Elton Brand. Not only is he still there, they gave him an extension. What's this all about? Like what?
All right. So logically, I think the Sixers are trying to have a quote unquote balance between an analytical approach with Daryl Morey and the player's mindset approach with Elton Brand. With that being said, Elton Brand really hasn't done anything to prove he deserves an extension. He gave up way too much for Tobias Harris in the trade. He signed him to a ridiculous extension. He got Jimmy Butler, but wasn't able to re-sign him because Brand wanted one more year, Brett Brown instead. And then, of course, he signed Mr. Albert Horford for 4 years. So I don't understand it. Maybe they have a better way to make this work, but I don't understand the move.
Did you just call him Albert Horford?
Yeah.
Okay. That's how we're doing this now. It doesn't even go by his nickname anymore, just Albert. That's even his real name.
I don't even know if that's his first name.
Yeah, I was like, I don't even know if that is or not, but oh well. Anyways, though, yeah, I think it's gonna be a little weird because Daryl Morey obviously this guy's has the reputation. He's the new guy on the block. I think it's kind of weird keeping the guy who was in charge around, and then not only that, but demoting him essentially. I just don't think that makes a lot of sense. I get maybe they like Elton Brand and stuff. Obviously, he was a former Sixer, but at this point, it just does not make sense to keep him around because there's definitely going to be some tension there, I'd imagine, and disagreements and stuff like that. And it's just going to be weird.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting and like you said, it's going to be a weird dynamic, like trying to figure out who is the real boss there. Obviously I hope it's Daryl Morey, but I think it's going to be a weird dynamic there for a little bit between those two.
Yep, can't be the Sixers without dysfunction somewhere in the mix, but
unfortunately that is true.
Yep. But anyways, though, a little fun fact here. The Raptors played their first game of their franchise's history yesterday, 25 years ago. So 25 years and a day ago, the Raptors became an NBA team. They took the floor for the first time. And I got to say, over the years, they have actually really developed themselves despite being the only non-US team they're probably one of the best franchises in the league right now.
Yeah, they certainly are. Obviously, winning that championship last year. I do have some fun facts about that first game, by the way.
Really?
So
Okay.
they played the New Jersey Nets at the Sky Dome in front of 33,000 fans, which is a lot for an NBA game. They won 94-79, and Alvin Robertson scored the franchise's first points, a three-pointer, and was the leading scorer in the game with 30 points. And another fun fact, in that 95-96 season, the Raptors were the expansion team. They won only 21 games in their inaugural season, but out of those 21 wins, one of those wins was against the 72-10 Chicago Bulls, and they were one of only 9 teams to beat the Bulls that year.
Wow, Matt. I'm glad you went above and beyond for that one because I really didn't look up anything.
Thanks, Wikipedia.
Yeah. Well, as a journalist, that may not be right. It's like that's all wrong. Like you didn't say one thing right there.
I'm pretty sure it's right.
What? So the part about so Kawhi Leonard wasn't on the team. What? No. So yeah, that's your fun history fact there from yours truly, Matt Szczypiorski. But let's also talk about this. This news literally broke like right after we stopped recording our show last week. But we have to talk about it anyway because now we're behind. But looks like that Steve Nash is getting the band back together. Mike D'Antoni and Amari Stoudemire, both guys were added to the Brooklyn Nets coaching staff. First, I want to say this, Matt. Isn't it like kind of weird that your former head coach is now your assistant coach? Extremely
weird, especially given that D'Antoni was a head coach last year. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be a weird dynamic too, considering it's obviously Nash's team. It's Nash's, thing to run here. But I don't know how D'Antoni's going to be able to interact in that environment where he's not the guy making the calls.
I mean, he must be somewhat okay with it because he signed off on it.
Right.
And I feel like he could have eventually gotten a head coaching job if he wanted because, he was there for the Rockets for a long time, but he was with the Knicks, he was with the Lakers, he's with the Suns. So this guy's been a head coach for a really long time and hasn't really been an assistant in a really long time. So I am curious to see how that dynamic works. Obviously, him and Steve Nash are really close. The good news is that they probably have pretty similar ideas. So I don't think it's going to clash that much, considering Steve Nash was a back-to-back MVP in Mike D'Antoni's offense. And, of course, Amari Stoudemire was a beast in that offense, too. He, I believe, doesn't really have any head coaching experience. He was playing overseas from Maccabi Tel Aviv in Israel, also played in China as well, Matt. But what do you think he can potentially add to this Nets team?
Well, I think Stoudemire will kind of bring an attitude that he had as a player. He was a very tenacious player, very, fiery guy. I think he can bring that to the coaching staff. And obviously with D'Antoni's going to bring the offense. But Stoudemire might bring some more of that defensive mentality.
Yeah, for sure. I'm very curious to see how this offense is going to look. We've already hinted, Steve Nash has already hinted that Kevin Durant is going to be playing all over the floor, playing all 5 positions on offense. That's playing point guard, playing center, and of course, playing the wing like he typically always does. Very curious to see how they use him. They have a lot of other ball-dominant players, too, that are good with the ball in their hands. I'm very interested to see how there's only one basketball on the court, so I'm curious to see how they kind of balance the minutes out here.
Yeah, I think obviously Irving and Durant are going to split most of the shooting there in Brooklyn, but I think D'Antoni's actually going to be a huge help on the offensive end in terms of, drawing up some cool isolation plays for Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, which he's been known to do with James Harden the last couple of years. So I think he'll probably have some pretty creative ideas for them.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, we saw Mike D'Antoni help, make James Harden become one of the most dynamic offensive players we have ever seen. And Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are already pretty high up on those lists to begin with. So I think that he could definitely help out their games because, Steve Kerr, but if you look at like Kevin Durant's first couple of years when he had Scott Brooks, Billy Donovan there as head coaches, they're not as centered offensively. But Mike D'Antoni and Steve Kerr also, both those guys are very creative offensive head coaches. So I think we're going to see Kevin Durant expand his game, maybe even more.
Yeah, that would be pretty scary sight to see, especially of an injury.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I should say expand his game more because I don't think there's anything he can't do, but we'll see him put in more situations. Yeah, I don't want to sound like that guy. But last but not least here, let's talk about his old team, the Golden State Warriors. They have these new unis out. It's an ode to the We Believe jerseys that they used to wear. That's when they made that run as the 8th seed. They knocked off the Dallas Mavericks in the first round. I believe that was 2006.
2006, yep.
Yep. And led by Baron Davis and Steven Jackson, Monte Ellis, Al Harrington, guys like that. They were a really, really good team, really talented offensively. And if you ask the Golden State Warrior fans, that was always like their team. The day one Warrior fans, not the bandwagoners, that we believe team always held a really special place in their hearts.
Yeah, I think they're sick jerseys, but extremely questionable timing. The team just left Oakland last year for the first time in 50 years, and the jerseys say Oakland on them, not Warriors. And it's in the middle of a lawsuit with the city about who is going to pay the remainder of the $40 million debt owed to the stadium. And, the Warriors just rolled out these uniforms literally the day after the team announced they were taking this issue to California Supreme Court. But, hey, the jerseys are tight, though.
Yeah, I guess maybe that's like we're sorry.
We'll give you these cool jerseys.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen the South Park episode where they do the BP oil spill, but the guy's always just like, we're sorry. We're really sorry. That's just kind of what that reminds me of, because they just don't really know what they're doing there. But yeah, it's pretty funny. But yeah, the jerseys are pretty sick. I'm not going to lie. I was hoping they were going to unveil those jerseys at some point, because I always really like the Warriors jerseys, and they have really cool throwback ones. So it's about time they brought those ones back. Those are always my favorite.
Yeah, they wore them for one game. I think it was their last regular season game in the old Oracle Arena in Oakland. I think they pulled out the white versions of those uniforms, and the crowd was pretty stoked to see those. So good to see them back.
Yep, good to see him back. That's going to wrap up around the association. Shorter than usual because there wasn't as much going on in the realm of basketball. Of course, we got the draft coming up, and we'll talk about some of the big rumors going on there. But let's go to our players of the week here. Again, no games to base it off of, but we each kind of have a little bit of a theme going with our list. Again, we don't know who we're going to say, so if we end up with any of the same players, I'd be pretty surprised, especially this week, Matt. I dug in my bag a little bit here. So, Matt, I'll let you go. Who was first on your list?
Yeah, I've had a theme pretty much every week, and this week I've decided to do an apology tour. This is say something nice about the players I've ripped on the podcast. These are not apologies. They've been ripped for a reason, but just simply me saying some nice things about them. So we're going to start off with the obvious, Al Horford. I haven't liked him since he joined the Celtics and was Embiid's kryptonite, and was actually decently excited when the Sixers signed him just because it meant Embiid wouldn't be tortured by him anymore. Little did I know. Horford won back-to-back national championships with Florida in 06 and 07 with Billy Donovan, Joakim Noah, Chandler Parsons. He's a 5-time All-Star and was really good for some of those good Hawks teams back in the 2010s. He's also exceptionally good at that disappointed clap that players do when they do something bad. He could have been first-team all-disappointing clap this season, no doubt, if that was a stat.
Wow. I guess Matt's trying to mend some bridges here on the podcast, because Al Horford is probably number one on the hit list for Matt Szczypiorski's do not like list of NBA players. But yeah, I mean, look, Al Horford's had a great career. He's pretty much been a winner everywhere he's been. I'm sure, I don't know what the statistics are, but I'm pretty sure he's made the playoffs almost every single year of his career. He won in college, of course. He was really good in the Atlanta Hawks, was an all-star. I believe he actually did make some all-star games with the Celtics as well. But as he's waning, I think he's still a good player. He's overpaid, and that's the Sixers' fault. Also does not fit well at all with the Sixers. I don't understand why they signed him. But if he was on another team, I think he could be a pretty valuable asset still. Maybe like a Marcus Gasol was to the Raptors.
Yeah, you know who should trade for him? The Sacramento Kings. You know what they should give the Sixers? Buddy Hield. That sounds like a great trade.
Yeah, that's very even. But I actually have a theme for my list, and it is second-year players or entering their second year who I think have a chance to break out. And I'll start off with Chicago Bulls guard Kobe White. I think entering the draft, I didn't love the fit with the Bulls just because he's not really like a true pass-first point guard. I kind of think he's actually more of a two-guard that can make plays for others. But nevertheless, though, he can score the ball really well. He's extremely fast, and he really started to figure things out. It was unfortunate we didn't see the Bulls in the bubble because Kobe White, I think, would have been one of those guys we talked about, like, oh, wow, look how well he's playing. But Kobe White's really talented. He made second team all rookie. He has a lot to his game. And I think if they're able to get maybe another playmaker in the draft at that 4 spot, which they'll have a chance to do, I think that's going to open up the offense. And I think Kobe White under Billy Donovan could have a nice season.
Yeah, I think, we've talked about the Bulls a little bit here with the in terms of once they hired Billy Donovan. Billy Donovan, everywhere he's gone, he's been pretty good with point guards and with Russell Westbrook and then Chris Paul this past year. I think it's going to be great for Kobe White's development. And I think also, White getting out of the Garpack system that was in place in Chicago the past few years is good for him too, because they were playing him off the bench. So I think he's probably worthy of starting on that team.
I would say so. Yeah. I think defensively, it's just not great with him and Zach LaVine in that backcourt. Chris Dunn, who is a free agent, and I'm not sure he's going to re-sign with them again, but he's more of a defensive guy, and that's kind of why they went with him in the starting lineup. Also because, Zach LaVine carries so much on offense that it's hard for him to really kind of focus in on that end of the ball, nor is he a great defender to begin with. But, yeah, I think Kobe White's definitely got some potential, and I think he'd be a second-year breakout candidate. So, Matt, I have a feeling who's next on your list here now that I know the theme.
Yeah, it's Russell Westbrook.
Yeah.
He was pretty good for a 20-game stretch there in 2020, right before the COVID shutdown. Good enough to get him on the All-Star team this past year. He's a 9-time All-Star, 9-time All-NBA selection, inexplicably including this year for some reason. 2-time scoring champ, 2-time All-Star Game MVP, and of course had that ridiculous MVP season in 2016, 2017, right after Durant left. I was actually Team Westbrook after Durant left, and I loved watching him play that season and carry that team on his back because he did. And ever since then, he's been extremely meh and just has been a big-time stat patter. But I will say that he is super fast, and his dunks are always fun to see.
Yeah, Russell Westbrook may be one of the most entertaining players to watch, especially in the regular season, because he plays 100% and gives it everything every single game. And so when you're watching, game 53 of the season, players are kind of taking it easy, blah, blah, blah. Russell Westbrook can put on a show. It's always been the playoffs. Why does he not show up? I think it's because the game slows down. It becomes a more half-court game. That doesn't help Westbrook as much because the floor, it gets tighter. The paint gets a little more compact. They're not calling as many fouls, and that hurts a player like Westbrook who struggled to shoot from the perimeter his whole career.
That's a great point, Hunter. He's always been a great slasher and great at getting to the rim and great on fast breaks. And, in the playoffs, it doesn't happen as much. That's a good point.
But I will say this. Russell Westbrook, the way he was ending the season, he was playing phenomenal, especially before the restart. He was really, really good. And let's not forget, he got COVID right before the NBA restart. So he already was missing games. Then he got injured right before the playoffs or like game 1 or game 2 of the playoffs? I remember because he missed some games against the Thunder. So he was not 100%. Yeah. Clearly. He went out there. He tried his best. You clearly see he wasn't himself. So maybe the Rockets, if he is 100%, again, I have no idea. We actually forgot to talk about the head coaching hiring they made. But we'll get to that too, I guess, now. But, I think Russell Westbrook, when he's at his best, I mean, he's a Hall of Famer, and he's arguably a top 10 talent in the NBA when he is playing at his best.
Yeah, he's just got to quit the turnovers, man. The turnovers are brutal. It's just disgusting basketball to watch, which is why I haven't liked him. This year.
It's definitely difficult watching him play sometimes for sure. But the internet wants to load a little bit here. But we're going to talk about the Houston Rockets here because they made, in my opinion, a very, very great hire in Steven Silas. He was an assistant coach with the Dallas Mavericks. I believe he may have been an interim coach. I think Carlisle may have missed some games a couple years back, but this is a phenomenal hire. I know it's not the big name hire that maybe a Doc Rivers would have been, but this guy really knows what he's doing, especially on the offensive side of the ball. We saw the Dallas Mavericks have, I think, either the highest or one of the highest offensive ratings in NBA history last season with a ball-dominant guy like Luka Doncic. They ran pretty similar stuff in Dallas. He's going to carry that over to Houston, and I think this was a great hire for the Rockets.
I agree, too, and I always love the under-the-radar hires, like how Indiana hired their coach as well. I think, hiring assistant coaches is the way to go now in the NBA who have had success where they've been, because just recycling the old NBA coaches, like recycling the D'Antonis and the Rivers over and over. It gets to a point where there's just no more good ideas left for them, and it's the same thing just in a different place. And I think this is a good, refreshing hire for the Rockets. I think it'll be good for them. All they need is a center.
Yeah, that's true. I guess that'll take some time, I guess. But I love this hire. This guy's been due for a head coaching job. It's about time they hired him. He is in a great situation too, well deserved. But anyways, though, next on my list, again, keeping up with second-year players I think are going to break out. I'm going to talk about a guy who I really liked coming into the draft and had a better year than people even thought, I guess, except for me. And that's PJ Washington for the Charlotte Hornets. Really, really solid player. I respect him because freshman year at Kentucky, he was good. Probably would have been drafted borderline first round, probably a second round pick, but goes, I'm going to come back to college. I'm not ready. I need to work on my game. Looked himself in the mirror and then ended up being a lottery pick as a result. He was second team all rookie this season. He was great for the Hornets. He fits that offense really well. And I think they finally found a good building block to build off of. They have the number 3 pick this year. Devontae Graham broke out for them. I think the Hornets can be not a great team, but a fun team to watch.
Yeah, they always have been, especially this year. They were a fun team to watch just because they scored in bunches and they had a lot of young guys on that team that were exciting to watch, like Washington, like Devontae Graham, who broke out this year. I think, Charlotte's a tough situation because they're not a big team. They're not a big market team. It's tough for them to bring free agents in and, keep them. But I do think, building through draft is the good way to go for them. And I think Washington is a good building block, like you said.
Yeah, I think PJ Washington is a very underrated player, and he's got a lot of skill to his game. Just extremely solid, knows how to play his role, but also can score when his number's called on. So I'm gonna take a guess who's on your list here, Matt. I think I may know who it is.
Okay.
Is it Rowan Barrett Jr.?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
All right, so this one is kind of like, I don't want to say it's like a personal beat, but it's not. It's just Barrett has always just been a really overrated player, in my opinion, ever since, I started watching him play at Duke. But he was the 3rd pick in the NBA draft. That's pretty cool until you realize he was drafted by the Knicks. Poor guy. The nicest thing I'll say about Barrett is that he still has so much time to develop, and the intangibles are there for him to become a good player. He just has to pull it all together. And the question for him is, whether he puts it all together as a Knick. I think that's kind of up in the air because I playing with Thibodeau, he's going to play a lot of minutes. He's going to have a lot of opportunities to put it all together, but I just don't know if that situation is great for him right now.
Yeah, he'll probably be used the way Jimmy Butler was used to play 39 minutes a game and lead the NBA in minutes, and he'll probably get plenty of shots. If I'm the Knicks, I probably do give him all those shots. At this point, he's probably the most valuable asset you have, so you might as well see what you got in him rather than holding him back. But I like RJ Barrett. He's kind of like a Westbrook in the sense that you either love him or you hate him, I guess, or maybe you just accept who he is and you're just right in the middle about him. But RJ Barrett, he's been a winner everywhere he's gone. Won a lot of games at Duke. He won a lot of games at Mount Verde Academy. He even, beat the U.S. team on the under-17 game for Canada and was by far the best player on the court. People forget he was the number 1 player coming out of high school, definitively, and Zion Williamson took off. But RJ Barrett, and even when Zion wasn't playing, he stepped up and was even better and was the guy when Duke needed him to be. Also led that team in scoring. It wasn't Zion. RJ Barrett led the team in scoring. People forget that. But I think he's a really talented player. Definitely needs to get more efficient, I guess you can say. Definitely needs to clean up some of the turnovers that he has, not only passing, but sometimes teams can force charges on him. He kind of keeps his head down a little bit. But I think if developed correctly, I do think that RJ Barrett can become a pretty good offensive threat in the NBA.
Yeah, I hope for the Knicks' sake that's true, but I'm not convinced yet. I'm off the train right now, but I can get back on.
Yeah. Okay. But last but not least on my list, and this one's a given. And you can argue that he's already here. But that's John Morant, the guy picked before RJ Barrett. I mean, we saw guys like Trae Young after their first year, a great first year, take a huge step. Luka Doncic, huge step. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, huge step forward. And even you can even go back to guys like Damian Lillard and Kyrie Irving and stuff like that. I think John Morant's taking that next step forward. We haven't seen him play in a while because Memphis got knocked out in that playing game. So it's been some months since we've seen John Morant. He's one of the most exciting players in the NBA. And I'm not sure I've seen a player as fearless coming into the league as John Morant.
Yeah, he certainly is. Just the way he attacked the basket, like he was not afraid of going up against those centers and trying to dunk on them. Even the wily NBA veterans. Remember when he tried to dunk on Kevin Love? That was disgusting. But I think the big thing for him is also cut down on the turnovers. But as a rookie, that's kind of expected to have a high turnover rate. And becoming a more consistent shooter as well. He did play a lot better in the bubble in terms of shooting, in terms of 3-point shooting as well. I think if he continues to prove on all of that, he'll take that huge next step, much like Doncic did, much like Trae Young did.
Yeah, I mean, he's got so much raw talent there. His story is crazy. He wasn't highly heralded at all coming out of high school, went to Murray State, and then all of a sudden just went on the map, and people were like, Jesus. I remember the first game I watched was of like a full game of John Morant was against Alabama. And that was like, okay, this is like a legitimate team. This isn't like some, little team that you're going to play in Murray State. And he absolutely dominated. I mean, he had that one guy, he literally jumped over a guy in that game. I was like, Jesus Christ, this kid's insanely good. And I knew from right there from the start, I'm like, he is going to be a star in the NBA.
Yeah, even that, if you remember back to the last March Madness tournament there was, they played that game against Marquette where all the storylines were him against that, I can't remember his name, the guy
Marcus Howard.
Marcus Howard, about the two best scorers in the nation, and John Morant played so much better than him in that game. He really outperformed him. I'm sure Howard scored a lot of points in that game, but John Morant was doing everything. He's playing great defense, had a great dunk in that game. He was hitting threes. I think he hit like the first 3 threes he took in that game, if I remember correctly. He was really, he was on the map before that game, but he really solidified himself as being worthy of a top 3 pick in the draft.
Yeah, he did. And although they lost to Florida State, he dominated in that game too. I believe he may have had a triple-double in that game, or was really close because, I remember watching that game too. He was one of those guys that you had to watch solely because to see him play. Because let's be honest, that Murray State team was pretty garbage.
Yeah.
Couldn't name one player on that team. They had one guy, though, who was like their center. He's like 6'5", like 350 pounds.
Yeah, he was chunk, bro. I remember that guy. He was a tub.
Yeah, but outside of that, maybe he was playing the wrong sport. But that is going to wrap up our players of the week. I hope you were entertained. I was pretty entertained by your list, Matt. But we're going to talk about the NBA draft. It is coming up November 18th on Wednesday. So that is approximately 2 weeks from now. So it's right around the corner. It's a weird time to have the draft. It's typically in June. But nevertheless, they've had draft combines and stuff. Teams are allowed to meet with, I believe, up to 10 players, which is a lot less than they normally are. Usually it's like 30 you can meet with or something like that. But there's a lot of speculation going on here. And something that was beginning to break right before we started recording this podcast is Drew Holiday is being shopped by the New Orleans Pelicans. The team is openly discussing him in trade talks. A lot of contending teams are trying to get him. Matt, I want to start off with this. Should the Pelicans move on from Holiday here?
I don't think they should. I think it's a matter of finances for them, and I think it's a matter of, is he going to fit long-term in their plans? Because I'm not sure when his contract is up. It could be either next year or the year after, but I'm not sure if he's going to fit in their long-term plans. So they're trying to get, maybe a guy that would be there for longer. I would be interested in Holiday on the Sixers again, maybe a little reunion there. But that's pretty much everybody who's not Al Horford and Tobias Harris back on the Sixers. I'd like that. But, I think it's tough because he is a great player and he's a great defensive player, which is what they need, especially in that backcourt there because J.J. Redick's not playing defense. Lonzo Ball's been kind of like an up-and-down defender. He's gotten better since he was than he was on the Lakers. But I think, Holiday overall, I think it's tough. But if you're going to get a good return for him, I would look into a deal.
Yeah, I guess it depends how bad these teams want Drew Holiday. What are they willing to give up? I completely disagree with the philosophy of trying to move him unless you get like a ransom, a king's ransom for him. Because I think Drew Holiday, and while he puts up great numbers, he's just one of those guys that is just a baller. This guy just on both ends of the floor can get it done. You very rarely see guards that can play at that high level on both ends of the floor. And if you're the Pelicans, like, what are you doing? Like, I get they're a young team, but I was extremely like disgusted watching them in the bubble, like intentionally like tank in the bubble.
Yeah.
I'm like, why are you even there then if you're not even trying to win games? Playing Zion Williamson on a 15-minute playing time restriction.
Yeah,
He's
that was
really
bad.
upset and frustrated about that. Like, what are you doing? Like, you're there to win games. You play the game to win. And for a team that I don't think is that far off from making the playoffs next year, they have an all-star there in Brandon Ingram. You figure Zion Williamson's going to be even better next year. You have a good bench with guys like J.J. Redick and Derek Favors and Nico Lamelli, Lonzo Ball's in the starting lineup, Josh Hart. You have all these like weapons and you're good enough to contend, but you're like, let's trade Drew Holiday. Like, that just does not make sense to me. Like, what are you doing, New Orleans?
Yeah, I'm not sure how much sense it makes either. It honestly just sounds like they're trying to fix a financial situation maybe, but I don't even know how much is he making like 20 mil a year?
I'll look that up. Let's see how much.
Yeah.
I bet you he's not making that much money.
And also see when his contract is up too, because I'm interested to see that as well. Just because, you know, if he's got a lot of time, if he has more than 2 years left on his deal, they shouldn't trade him.
Yep, looking this up right now. Okay. All right, we are going to his contract details. Okay, so he just finished the third year of his deal. He signed a 5-year, $131 million deal. Next season, he's going to be making $25 million, give or take. And then if he opts in for next season, the following one, he will be making $26 million. So that's probably about a fair price for Drew Holiday. I'd say he's probably being paid about what he should be getting paid. So it's a reasonable contract for a guy. Like, if I took on that money, I would know what I'm getting with Drew Holiday.
Yeah, and I think, you know, with the possibility of him having that opt-out after this year, that might be one of the reasons they're looking to trade him. Similar to Anthony Davis, they just know that he probably won't re-sign there. So maybe that's the reason they're looking to shop him, because they think it's probably his last year there and they want to get some value before he hits the open market.
But I don't know. Would he not re-sign there, though? Because, like, I feel like he's in a pretty good spot with the Pelicans. Like, you're with, like, two budding stars in Ingram and Zion and good role players. You know, they just hired Stan Van Gundy. Let's see how that works out. I feel like they're kind of, you know, pulling the trigger a little quick here, Matt.
Yeah, it's all about the dollar at the end of the day, Hunter. I think you know that. We all know that. It's all about the finances. It's all about, you know, Drew Holiday, if he can get more money somewhere else, maybe he considered not re-signing with the Pelicans. But I don't know. The whole thing kind of – he's been in rumors for a while, so I just kind of accepted the fact that they're open into trading him. But I never really thought why they would consider trading him, because honestly it doesn't make sense for them to trade him at this point, just because, like you said, they have a bunch of budding stars around him.
Yeah. Anyway, though, let's talk about some teams. You know, they said contending teams want Drew Holiday. Who do you think some of those teams could be, Matt?
Definitely the Sixers. I think the Sixers would definitely be interested. I think you look at the rest of the Western Conference, I could see Memphis going after him too. I think I talk about Memphis in trade talks a lot, but I think I could see them just because they could use another guard to pair with John Morant, because Dylan Brooks wasn't getting it done at shooting guard. I think that's who that is. I could see Drew Holiday playing shooting guard over Memphis as well.
I'm going to throw out a team that's a pretty interesting team, and I actually do think they have what it takes to get him. Ready?
Okay.
Phoenix Suns.
Okay, who are you giving up, Oubre?
You can, but you also have that 10th pick in the draft that I think if I'm the Pelicans, I would probably be like, yeah, I'll take the 10th pick in the draft. I believe Drew Holiday is better than whoever that pick is. Not only that, I like Ricky Rubio. He's a good NBA player, but he's not your long-term answer probably. Yeah. If you look at a guy like Drew Holiday, who defensively helps out Devin Booker a ton, because Devin Booker is your go-to guy on offense. He can guard best player on the perimeter. He obviously can make shots as well. This Suns team, they want to do whatever they can to keep Devin Booker there. And if you add Drew Holiday to what they already have, I think that they are probably a favorite to get one of those 8 spots in the playoffs entering next season.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. I think, they could even probably try to include Ricky Rubio in that deal, but I don't think the Pelicans would take him. And then in that case, I think Rubio would be probably a better option off the bench than he would be in the starting lineup. Especially long term, like you said, Drew Holiday could be a good solution for Phoenix going forward, especially defensively with Mikal Bridges there as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he'd be a phenomenal fit there. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that Monty Williams coached Drew Holiday in New Orleans. I could be wrong about that. I think he did coach him. So they have that connection there already. I'm going to look that up. I think he did. That this is off the top, and I'm going to be a good journalist that I am. And
don't go to Wikipedia.
And look this up. Yep, don't go to Wikipedia. Okay, let's see here. Okay. Yep, he did. He did coach him. So, yeah, that's what I thought, that they lined up like that. So they already has a relationship there with Drew Holiday. And I just think the fit makes so much sense. And the Suns, I think they want to make a splash this offseason. I think they want to make a big move that's going to help them put them over the top. And I think Drew Holiday could be that perfect move for them.
That's a good move, Hunter. I like that trade proposal a lot, actually.
Because I think with that 10th pick, you probably take another guard, but he's maybe not going to be as ready as a guy like Drew Holiday, who's going to come in right away and give you what you need. So I think that move makes a lot of sense. I could see like the Lakers, of course, maybe they can make that move. I know. I think the Lakers and Sixers are just two teams that are going to be in discussions for any of these guards because they could both teams could use a guy like that.
Absolutely.
But I think that, and also he's from Los Angeles, Drew Holiday, so I'm sure he would like to go back home if the opportunity presented itself. I'm not really sure who else. I'm sure there's teams out there. Maybe the Nets make that move if they're willing to. If they want to give a guy like Holiday, who plays well alongside ball dominant guards and Kyrie Irving, and he's willing to play that 2-guard spot. If they're willing to give up like a Spencer Dinwiddie and something else, and kind of get an upgrade at that position, I think he potentially fits better in that offense than Dinwiddie does.
Yeah, I think Holiday for like Karis LeVert or Joe Harris would be a good move for both sides, I think. Mm-hmm. Because, if the Pelicans are looking to improve their outside shooting, Joe Harris is obviously a great option.
Yeah. Joe Harris, very underrated sniper. But let's talk about the Golden State Warriors here. A lot of options with that second pick, not only drafting, but also trading. Our good friend Logan Barandez, I thought he was kind of nuts for bringing up this trade at the time on his mock draft. Be sure to check that out. But he talked about the Warriors potentially making a move at Kelly Oubre for the Phoenix Suns here. And apparently this is a legit thing, and they really like him. Averaged almost 20 points per game last year. This is obviously not a super stacked draft class as it's been in years past, but he is making $14.4 million next season. Golden State has a $17.2 million trade exception that they got from the Andre Iguodala deal. Do you think that the Warriors go all in and try to get Kelly Oubre here?
I think if you're the Suns, you definitely make this move, especially if the Warriors are giving you the number 2 pick for him. But in my opinion, I don't think that Oubre is worth the number 2 pick. But if you're the Suns and the Warriors offer you that, you can't say no, right? And as much as the Warriors, they want to win now. They still have the pieces to win now. The only reason they have the second pick is because everybody on the roster was hurt last year. So I would argue that it feels like the Warriors have been searching for a solid center for years, and they have the opportunity to fill that hole with a talented guy in James Wiseman with this pick. He'll probably be there at the number 2 slot. I would say don't overcomplicate this if you're the Warriors. This fills a huge hole. They could likely swing a deal for Oubre at the deadline if they're so interested in that. But for now, I say don't overthink this and keep the pick and draft Wiseman.
I absolutely agree with you, Matt, on this one because it just doesn't make sense. Like, where does he even start? Like, I don't even know because you have Curry, Thompson, Draymond Green, Andrew Wiggins already there. Does he start over Wiggins? Like, I don't know. Like, it feels forced. Apparently, it is a legit thing that's picking up steam, but I can see them liking Kelly Oubre, but to give up the second pick for a guy who may not start for you is a little ridiculous.
Yeah, that's absurd, especially when you just traded for Wiggins last year too.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, while the Suns like Kelly Oubre a lot, they did go 8-0 without him, and so I think while I don't think they'll shop him, like I don't think they'll be like who wants him kind of thing. I think they'd be stupid not to take the second overall pick in the draft because then that gives them 2 top 10 picks.
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely take the second pick in the draft for Kelly Oubre.
Yes, please. But next up, a guy who is pretty interesting here. That is DeMar DeRozan, who could potentially be on the move. Maybe one of the most confusing players in the NBA. Had a career high in effective field goal percentage. He had his second highest assist percentage in his career last season. However, though, this is the 10th time out of 11 seasons in his career that the team was statistically better with him off the floor than he was on the floor. He picked up his he has a chance to pick up his $27.7 million option this upcoming offseason, which is a pretty hefty price. Do you think, like, who are some teams here that will call the Spurs and be interested in DeMar DeRozan here?
I would say keep him as far away from Elton Brand as possible. Another guy who can't shoot threes, Brand is salivating right now at the thought of that. No, but in all seriousness, I could see maybe the Pistons maybe swinging a deal with him to pair him back up with Dwayne Casey up in Detroit. I could also see Orlando making a run at him because they need someone who can shoot, like they need air to breathe. And also, I want to bring this up, Toronto. Could you see him getting maybe traded back to the Raptors? I know he doesn't have the best relationship with that organization anymore since that trade because it hurt his feelings. But honestly, Toronto could use a shooting guard, especially with Van Fleet probably leaving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good option. I think all those teams you listed make sense. Did you say that, the Dwayne Casey connection there?
Yeah.
You did bring that up. Okay, you did. Yeah, the Magic have been the one team that has been, and this is the most Orlando Magic thing ever, super connected with DeMar DeRozan here and wanting him to be on their team. And I do think the fit makes sense. I personally, while I like DeMar DeRozan, not for that price per se, he's a good player, don't get me wrong. But like you said, Matt, he's not like the, oh my God, we got DeMar DeRozan kind of pick. Like, It's not the same as it was maybe a couple of years back when he was an all-NBA player. Still a really good player, but it's also hard kind of to build your team around a guy like that who's not only can't shoot, but he's a guard who can't shoot.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of a certain Ben Simmons. But, he just refuses to shoot threes. And in this day and age, to not be good at shooting threes and just outright refusing to take them, DeRozan, his value is way down. He's definitely not worth the $27.7 million he's getting on that contract.
But it's not, at least Ben Simmons, though, is an all-NBA defender and one of the best passers in basketball.
Yeah.
And whereas DeMar DeRozan is neither of those things. He's a good passer, not someone who's going to really elevate your team. Mm-hmm. And he was probably one of the worst on-ball defenders on the Spurs last year. And that's a team that thrives playing defense, and he was not that guy. So obviously they got him because they traded Kawhi Leonard and wanted to get something in return. But the fit does not make sense in San Antonio. Maybe he goes somewhere else that he can thrive in.
Yeah. I hope so.
Yeah. I remember we talked about this last year in the spring semester on a Penn State Sports Night segment about DeMar DeRozan. Back in the day.
Yeah. I think that was like my first segment for Penn State.
That was your first one?
Yeah. What a time.
Yeah. Back when we were allowed to have 3 people on set per segment. But anyways, though, let's talk about another trade that's definitely not going to happen, aside from Matt here, because the Sixers are going all in on James Harden, but the Rockets are all out on trading him.
Yeah, I highly doubt the Rockets would trade him. And, if they were to trade him to the Sixers, they would probably demand Embiid or Simmons, which I don't want to give up either of them. I think a trade package for that would probably look like one of Embiid or Simmons, probably Embiid, Thibault, and then maybe Tobias Harris as well if they're willing to take them. I hope so, and probably a first rounder because we all know how much Morey hates drafting. But how much would a fleece would that be if Morey left Houston and then said, "All right, I'm going to go to this team and then trade you for James Harden"?
That'd be pretty funny.
Yeah.
And probably but yeah, I don't see this happening. Because for one, I think it would have to be a deal that we saw for Anthony Davis and Paul George, where you have to give up like 4 or 5 first-round picks to get James Harden.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I guess Morey doesn't care about those picks. But at the same time, though, I just don't think it makes sense. And I just don't see James Harden wanting to leave Houston. Maybe he does in a year or two, but I just don't think that time's now.
Yeah, and I also don't. I honestly don't think he would fit well in the Philadelphia culture. To be quite honest with you, I don't think he's built for that. Especially with how critical us as Philly fans are. We would probably get frustrated with him shooting 30 times a game and making only like 10 of them. So I honestly don't like the deal. I wouldn't be happy if we gave up Embiid or Simmons for Harden.
Yeah, I just don't think it makes a whole lot of sense. But, they'll keep trying, I guess. But last but not least, a lot of interest in that number 1 pick, per se, in terms of a fan perspective, because the Timberwolves hold the first pick in the draft. There are rumors that maybe that they are interested in trading that number 1 pick. Could be because maybe there's not a guy they love at that spot. It's 2 weeks from the draft. And we really don't know who they're taking with the number 1 pick.
Yep.
It can go a lot of different ways here. They've been linked to multiple different guys, this is probably the first time I remember this in a really long time that we were left in the dark for that first overall pick. But what kind of interest do you think that they're going to get for that spot? And who do you think is a team that can maybe trade up for it?
Well, a team that immediately comes to mind is the New York Knicks. But would they even have enough to entice the T-Wolves into making this trade? I know the Knicks have a lot of picks, but I'm sure the Wolves would want a player as well. And, if you're the Knicks, that means you're probably going to have to give up RJ Barrett for that first pick, which would be stupid to give up on a player you drafted last year, 3rd overall, just to get another guy who you're going to have to continue to develop. And he's a year behind Barrett already. So I want to say the Knicks are probably, just because they want to move up from the 8th spot to not being that far back in the draft. But I just don't think that they would have enough to get a deal done there.
Yeah. If they're willing to give up a lot of picks, if they give up like another first-round pick, Kevin Knox, and like, I don't know, like Julius Randle or something, like,
it would have to be an unprotected pick though. They probably couldn't get
yeah,
it.
it'd have to be like, this pick's yours. Like,
yeah.
They do actually have a first-round pick this year, another one. It's at 27, I believe. So they could give that up. So then that leaves the Timberwolves with 3 first-round picks. Which I'm sure they would be interested in. But yeah, there's not a clean like fit at that number 1 spot for the Timberwolves. James Wiseman has already said, I do not want to play there. So I don't think they'll draft him. Plus they have Karl-Anthony Towns. That's not going to work.
Yeah.
LaMelo Ball, we've talked about. Anthony Edwards is also another guy. I think it's probably going to come down to Ball or Edwards for that 1 spot. They've been linked to Obi Toppin, and I actually love the fit there. But would you take a guy like him at the number 1 spot? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, they would probably have to trade down in order to make that happen. I think taking Obi Toppin 1st overall was probably a reach, especially considering you could probably trade out of that pick and probably take Toppin at like the 5th or 6th slot and get some value for that first pick as well. So I think if they want to draft Toppin, they could probably shop that first pick pretty well. But I do think Anthony Edwards would be a pretty good fit there as well.
Yeah, I agree. I was saying for a while, and I still don't know. I was like, I'm pretty sure this pick's going to be LaMelo Ball all the way. But I don't know. I think Anthony Edwards may sneak in there a little bit. He's more of a natural 2 guard. He's not a great defender, but has the physical capabilities of being, and he's arguably a better fit off of D'Angelo Russell than LaMelo Ball is perhaps.
Yeah, I actually think I like Edwards there as a fit better than LaMelo Ball, honestly.
Yeah. So I've been going back and forth with that. But I also think it's interesting too. Another team I want to bring up that I actually think is going to move up in the draft, I'm just not sure exactly where, is the Washington Wizards. Apparently, they really want to move up in this draft. I'm not sure specifically to target somebody, but they really want to move up. So maybe that's a team. I don't know what they give up to get to that number one spot. They don't really have a whole lot of assets to work with. Davies Bertans is a free agent, so they can't even give him up. You wouldn't give up Beal or John Wall.
Yeah.
So I have no idea who they'd be moving up for, but I think it'd be interesting to see them, who they target.
Yeah, I think honestly the only player that the Timberwolves would want at that one spot would probably be Bradley Beal, because that's a seamless fit with D'Angelo Russell. But I don't think John Wall holds that much value right now, especially coming off an injury and making all that money. And I think if the Wizards were to move up, it'd probably be just like 2 or 3 spots and not, all the way to the first pick.
Yeah, I'm curious to see who they want, because I guess they could I don't think they would, but Rui Hachimura could be in the deal. If there's someone they really love at that one spot, I just have no idea who it is, because I'm like, I don't know why you're like so gun ho on moving up in the draft.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think there's that guy this year that it's just like, I'm going all
Gotta
in.
have. Yeah,
It could be, maybe James, I think it could be James Wiseman, because the Warriors are probably, I think they're going to take him at 2. For a lot of the reasons you said, just the fit makes so much sense. But, and like, you'd have to probably jump them to get James Wiseman. So maybe that's the move, but I really don't know. I'm a little confused why they're apparently it is that the Wizards are going all in on moving up in this draft.
I would be very interested to see what they give up in order to get that done.
Yeah, me too. But yep, that's gonna wrap up our draft coverage. We'll give some more picks and whatnot during the next couple podcasts, because it's draft season now. It's one of my favorite times of the year. But last but not least, another fun All-NBA team that we always do here on Ball Don't Lie. All-NBA under the radar free agents teams. I dug in my bag a little bit for this one, Matt. I like to do that. But we're going to each give 5 players. Again, we don't know who we said, so I'm curious to see if you have any similarities. But we're each going to give 5 players who are entering free agency this year that not a lot of people are talking about, but could potentially make a nice impact for a team. So, Matt, I'll let you kick things off for us here.
I am starting with Christian Wood. He averaged 14 points per game and nearly a block per game this season with Detroit. After the Pistons traded Andre Drummond, still confused why the Cavs traded for him, by the way. Wood single-handedly kept the Pistons front court respectable, as he averaged 22 points and 9.5 rebounds over the final 15 games of the season, while also shooting 56% from the floor and 41% from 3.
Yeah, obviously he's not a guy who's going to put those numbers up for a totality of a season, but he's a guy who I really liked coming out of the 2015 draft and went undrafted. I actually had like a first-round grade on him. I'm like, why is he undrafted? But it took him a while to finally get back on track, put up some really good numbers with Detroit. Maybe he's found a home there. Oh, he posted on his Instagram, where should I go next? So perhaps he is not interested in playing for the Pistons. And I can understand why. Not the most fun team to play for. But I like that pick. And I think he's a guy who may get some dollars on the market.
I think, especially after the final 15 games he had, I think he could definitely turn that into a good payday.
Yeah, and also, too, he hasn't played in a while because the Pistons weren't in the bubble. But, yeah, I'm curious to see if he's a guy who can be a contributing player to a winning team, or he's a guy who just thrives because he's just getting shots. I'm curious to see about that.
Yeah.
But a guy who I have on my list, and you actually brought him up earlier in the podcast, Matt, and that is the sniper himself, Joe Harris. I'm not sure that the Nets are going to be able to re-sign him because they got a lot of mouths to feed there. And I'm not sure he even wants to be there if he's going to be like the 5th, 6th option on the team. But he, like we said, Matt, shooting is what makes you money in this league. He's one of the best shooters on the market, and I think a lot of teams could use him.
Oh, absolutely. I think, 3-point shooting is always going to be a valuable asset. And especially the way he shoots the ball. He shot over 40%, it seems like, every year that he's been in Brooklyn. I think, there's obviously plenty of suitors for a 3-point specialist, kind of like a younger JJ Redick, if you will. So I'd be interested to see what kind of money he gets on the market as well.
Also, what I like about Joe Harris, he shoots really well off the dribble, and
Mhm.
also, like a JJ Redick, moves really well without the ball in his hands and keeps that offense moving. He plays within a scheme really well, and has played within a couple, or actually, well, Kenny Atkinson, he played within that one really well, and I think he's going to be a highly coveted player on the open market. But Matt, who else made your list here?
We've talked about this guy a couple of times over the course of this semester. Jeremy Grant, former process legend, Jeremy Grant. We saw how well he performed in the bubble. He plays great defense and can guard just about any position as well. He makes open threes as well, which he has got to be appealing to teams, as we just talked about. And then he's also sneaky athletic. He's had some posters in his days, so look out for him.
Yeah, Matt, that was literally the next guy on my list.
Yeah.
I had a feeling if we were going to share a player, that was probably going to be it. But yeah, I think he's going to demand a lot of money on the market, especially the way he played in the playoffs. He's a guy who I think could fit with a lot of different teams, can play a lot of different positions, good on both ends of the floor, can score on all three levels. I think this is a pretty easy pickup for any team. I don't think he goes back to the Nuggets, though, because I just don't really think they can afford him.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to afford him either, especially after he just declined his option. I don't think they're going to re-sign him for something more expensive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was my second player on my list. I guess I'll go with my third here. Tristan Thompson is a free agent. And let's not forget, this guy did win a championship with the Cavs. And LeBron's been hinting that maybe he wants him to come to the Lakers. He can be with his girl, Chloe, again. But anyways, though, Tristan Thompson, I still think has value as a big man who is very good in the pick and roll. One of the best offensive rebounders in the NBA. We saw that kind of guy at that 5 position with JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard be pretty good. And Tristan Thompson, I believe averaged 12 points, 10 rebounds this year. So pretty respectable numbers, but it's more of the impact he makes on the court. And I remember watching some of those Cleveland Cavaliers finals runs, especially that last one when no Kyrie Irving, and it just seemed like LeBron was on island. While he's not a great scorer, he played pretty well and definitely made an impact on those teams.
Yeah, obviously it made a huge impact. And I think he'd be a good fit with the Lakers as well, just because, like you said, McGee and Howard both thrived under that offense, and they're probably both not going to re-sign with the Lakers because I think Howard will get more money somewhere else. And I think, McGee, I think McGee could be back, but I think if they were to sign Tristan Thompson, I'd imagine Thompson would start over McGee. And I think, obviously LeBron loves playing with Tristan Thompson. He advocated for Thompson to get an extension when he was due for one with the Cavs. So I think that is a good fit.
Also, they won't have to sign him for as much money as the Cavs did. So that's good.
Definitely.
But again, the Rich Paul connection, both are under Clutch Sports. LeBron obviously already has a close relationship with him, even though he cursed him out once for bringing the Kardashians in the locker room. But yeah, I think Tristan Thompson is a good NBA player still. And with Dwight Howard probably leaving, I believe JaVale McGee is probably going to opt in to his player option. So he actually may be back next season. But I think Thompson's a better player, and he'll probably get the start. And I think the Lakers replenish a position there with getting Thompson.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay, so Matt, who is number 3 on your list here?
I have Jay Crowder. This guy is going to get a lot of attention from some win now teams. He plays good defense and is kind of hot and cold in terms of shooting, but when he's hot, he's very good. I'd be shocked if the Heat didn't offer him a contract, especially after he played with them this past season. And if he doesn't stay there, I could see him either going to either LA team, the Clippers or the Lakers. And I could also see him going to Milwaukee as well. I think he's a seamless fit in all of those places. And pretty much any team that wants to win now could use a 3-and-D guy.
Yeah, I think another team, 2 teams I think are going to be pretty interesting. One, the Dallas Mavericks. He actually did play for Dallas and was really good there. So he's already familiar with Rick Carlisle. But I think another team is the Portland Trailblazers. They can use some wing help as well. And we clearly saw that in the playoffs that they need another guy who can play defense on the wing because Gary Trent Jr. should not be guarding LeBron James. But Matt, we talked about him a ton on this podcast, especially because the Heat made that huge run in the playoffs. Really valuable player. He's more of a don't look at the box score, just watch him play kind of guy. Although he does score points, but he's just super tough, definition of a glue guy. I love that they traded for him from Memphis. He actually proved to be the bigger asset than Andre Iguodala was.
Yeah. Yeah, he was more significant in that playoff run than Iguodala was.
Mm-hmm. All right, cool. Number 4 on my list is Malik Beasley for the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Nuggets obviously weren't interested in re-signing him, so he is now a restricted free agency with the Timberwolves. Again, maybe it depends on what happens in this draft because they may draft a guard. But if Malik Beasley, let's say the Timberwolves draft a guard, then number 1 spot, and Malik Beasley's on the open market, he could be a guy who I think a team can, find value in to be a good guy, either maybe as a starter, but maybe a really good bench player too.
Yeah, I would see him more as definitely a big contributor off the bench, not necessarily a starter. I could see him going to a middling team that maybe wants to make that next step in terms of competing. But I could also see him in a win-now situation as well. I don't think he would start for a win-now team, but I think he'd be a great contributor off the bench.
Yeah, he thrived when he got to Timberwolves because he did start. They're not a great team, but he really did put up nice numbers, and I think helped increase his stock and show people that, hey, when I have the ball in my hands, I can be a threat, because obviously the Nuggets have so many guys at guard, but Timberwolves not as deep, and he showed that he can have value.
Yeah, all you need is a chance sometimes, man.
All he needs a chance sometimes, but maybe he gets his get out of jail free card with the Timberwolves' first pick in the draft this year.
Yeah.
Number 4 on your list, Matt. All right. Yep, number 4 on your list, Matt. Who is it?
All right, it's another legend of the process, Dario Saric. One of my favorite Sixers players from that 17-18 team that made the playoffs for the first time post-Hinkie. He is a restricted free agent and would likely be a bench player wherever he goes, but he brings some great value off the bench. His motor is always running on defense, and he played great as a small ball 5 for the Suns in the bubble as well. So I do expect him to stay in Phoenix, especially since it's a restricted free agent situation. So I think, depending on the money, he'll probably stay in Phoenix.
I think the key part, Matt, as we've talked about this whole podcast, is the money part, because I think the Suns, does he fit? Absolutely. And I think he's a good player that can definitely get minutes on any kind of team. But I like him to an extent. Like, I'm not willing to pay him $20 million.
Oh, definitely not.
Definitely not. But 10 to 15, yeah, I think that's fair. But I don't know. Again, restricted free agency is a little tricky because sometimes there's just one team that's like, I'm going to go all in on this guy. And then you kind of screw the other. Yep, and you screw the other team over who owns his rights. Like, oh, do we pay him that much? We like him, but how much do we like him? If you're the Suns, you can cut your losses. If someone else is willing to pay him, they can take him.
Yeah, if it's over $20 million, I'm definitely out on that for Phoenix.
Yep. And cool. So last but not least on my list here, not an under-the-radar player, but maybe an under-the-radar free agent get, and that is Carmelo Anthony. He had a really good season with the Portland Trailblazers, fit really well in that offense. It seemed like, I've been saying for years when Melo was bouncing around with teams, I'm like, I think that the Trailblazers could really use a guy like that. And he showed his value, especially when the lights were the brightest, because Melo is one of the best clutch scorers the game has ever seen. And you can look up the numbers, it backs it up. But Melo, he's a guy who I think wants to play for a contributing team. Maybe Portland re-signs him again, who knows? But if not, I think that he definitely proved that he still has value in this league.
I could totally see him going back to Portland. I actually would like to see him go back to Portland. He fit really well there. It seemed like he brought a lot of chemistry to that team as well. But I could also see him teaming up with LeBron in LA. I could also see him going back to the Knicks as well. Apparently, there's interest there. But I don't know if that's contingent on Chris Paul going there, as we've discussed. But I could see him going back to New York. But I think, like you said, he does want to play for a competing team. So I would like to see him go back to Portland.
Maybe if the Nuggets lose Millsap and Jeremy Grant, maybe he makes a return back to Denver. I don't know.
And they finally put him on that tweet.
He would finally put him on the tweet. And they can retire his number and stuff. He actually would low-key be kind of a nice fit there. I'm not going to lie. If they lose those guys because they would have a hole at that forward spot. Obviously, Michael Porter would fill one of them, but they would need another guy, and I think he actually could be pretty good there. But they could use another clutch scorer like that. But anyways, though, I think Melo still's got game left. I think he can still play. I respect the fact that he lost a lot of weight entering the bubble, and he was in as good a shape as we've seen, and it translated into on-court success as well. If he is able to keep his mind right, he's able to stay in shape, in condition for a guy who's entering now his 18th season in the NBA, he can still get you a bucket.
Oh, absolutely. He can still get you a bucket. He can get you a few buckets if he puts a hoodie on. I think he's a great fit with Portland, like I said, but Denver's interesting. Man. I like that, especially as like maybe he doesn't start, maybe he does. But I could totally see him being a good fit there, especially since they need a forward with Grant probably leaving.
Yeah. I kind of just thought of that one off the top, not going to lie.
Yeah.
But to wrap things up for us here, Matt, who is the final player on your team?
This is a really, really small name, but I'm going to bring it up anyway. Chris Chiozza. Anyone who had the painful joy of watching the Brooklyn Nets play basketball in the bubble knows that that Chiozza can carve out a role for himself as a reliable bench option for any team that might be interested. He is a decent defender and a great passer, extremely underrated passer. And all he needs to do is become more consistent with his shooting, and he should be able to crack a lineup off the bench.
That's a great name to bring up. He's a grinder. I believe he's the all-time assist leader at Florida, University of Florida. Mm-hmm. He's a no-nonsense player. Like you said, Matt, he was one of those guys that can always makes the right play every time he's playing. Whether they're giving him the shot, he'll take it. He's not afraid, but also can find open guys as well. I would really love if he stayed with the Nets because I think he'd play really well alongside dominant scorers like a Kyrie Irving, like a Kevin Durant, the other names they have. Kind of reminds me a bit, not the same player, but like an Alex Caruso, can do a little bit of everything, came up from the G League, and is a guy who I think he plays better in a winning situation. You know what I mean? He's not a guy who's going to average 20 points per game on a bad team, but he's a guy who can help elevate your stars, and the Nets need those guys right now.
You know who he reminds me of when you said that he plays better with a good team? Matthew Dellavedova. That's what he reminds me of.
A little bit.
Like a little bit of that Delly type.
Yeah, there's just some guys that, like even a Draymond Green, like we talked about, he struggled last year. I'm like, that's because he plays better with better players. He elevates other guys. That's a Chris Chiozza, not that he's Draymond Green, but that's what I think that's kind of what he is that. And Florida was significantly worse when he left that program. So he's a winner. We've seen it. He helps make other guys better. And if I'm the Nets, and you probably don't even have to give up that much to get, you don't have to pay that much to keep him at all. But that's definitely a must keep for them because I remember watching him this season and he was terrific for them.
Yeah, it's definitely a small move, probably be under $5 million a year, but I think it's a move they should make.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought him up. I'm a big Chris Chiozza guy. But that is going to wrap up our podcast here on Ball Don't Lie. Even though the NBA doesn't have anything going on right now in terms of games, we're still powering through right now. Still, mustering up anything we can talk about. We'll give you draft coverage. We'll give you free agency previews, anything in between. Appreciate you all listening per usual. And be sure to catch us every week here on Penn State Sports Night.
Adios.
Thank you for watching this edition of Penn State Sports Night. If you're a fan of our content, please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more clips. Also, follow us on Twitter at PSSN TV and on Instagram at PSU Sports Night to keep up with all the action. For all my colleagues, we are Penn State Sports Night.